Heather from booktubes, and today is Omegaverse romance recommendations. So honestly, Omegaverse might be the weirdest thing that I read. I'm not gonna lie to you. So if you're not familiar, I feel like Omegaverse might appeal to people who are already into shifter romances. So Omegaverse can be shifter romance, or it can be like humanoid people with animalistic traits who don't actually shift into an animal. So in Omegaverse world, there are alphas, betas, and omegas. Alphas rule the world, betas are worker bees for the most part, and then omegas are breeders, and they are really valued for their breeding ability because they're the only one that alphas can breed. But they're also like weak and fragile, and often don't have rights. Honestly, they often have a really bad place in the world where they don't have any rights. They're at risk from everybody because they provoke uncontrollable lust in the people around them when they are in heat, and so they are at risk. And because of this, a lot of times alphas kind of lock them up and keep them safe and protected, but also no freedom and no say. And it varies a lot. So there are some that I don't recommend at all that I think are incredibly abusive and I just don't enjoy reading about. Honestly, that's probably the majority of Omegaverse books. So it's not like the easiest genre to just hop around in and see if you like, because a lot of times you're going to read things that you are past your comfort zone and you don't like. Depends on how dark you like your stories, but I tend to not like abuse in my stories. I don't mind so much things that have dubious consent. That doesn't bother me when it's the hero and the heroine, especially if things get worked out. Like, I don't mind that being my dark content, but I don't like actual abuse coming from the hero towards the heroine. I don't really like the heroine being abused by anybody, to be perfectly honest. But that does tend to be very, very common in the genre. So these are ones that are pretty safe, and I will try and give you kind of the levels of safety, if you will, but also have alphas that I was able to forgive, which is not true of all the Omegaverse books that I've read. And so yeah, these are kind of safer, maybe good places to start. And again, I don't like a lot of abuse. So if you know a pretty safe Omegaverse, feel free to give me recommendations. But a lot of the most popular ones, like Alison and Zoe Ellis, not for me. Not for me at all. So just be aware of that. Well, also, Omegaverse tends to be very, very smutty, just so you know. There's like a lot of fluids. There's nothing, which is like where like a donut-like thing at the base swells and locks them together, kind of like canines. So there's that's a thing. There's lots of slick, and there's lots of body fluids, and Omegas nest, and they create the nest, and it needs to smell like them and their alpha. So there's a lot of body fluids all over the nest. Like there's a lot of weird things. I'm not gonna lie to you. There's a lot of weird things, but it's smutty, wild. It's a lot. It's a lot. I'm into it. Don't ask me why. First one that I want to recommend is Forbidden Flames by Alison. This is a novella. It's like 100 pages, and it's in a series that I haven't read any of the other books, but I've read this one. And he is like the outcast warlord of this area of like outcasts, and his uncle killed his father and blamed him for it, and his twin brother is still with his uncle, and he hears that his uncle ordered this weapon and he intercepts it, and it turns out that it's this Omega. So the deal is, obviously Omegas tend to be irresistible, but she actually has a toxicity, and she kills, like, burns alive anybody who touches her, and she can't control it. So it's very harmful and traumatic for her because she has been forced over and over again to kill people, and she can't not do it. So it's very stressful for her. And he finds her, and she's like, no, don't touch me. And he's like, all right. So he gets the weapon, and he's like, oh, you're the one for me. You're my Omega. You're my mate. And she's like, you can't touch me. And it's them. He makes some mistakes, but he ends up learning his lesson. We like that. And it's really just them finding a way to be together and, you know, winning the battle and all of that jazz. So it's shorter. It's a little bit darker. Definitely consent. She's like very attracted to him, but also Omegas can't resist alphas for the most part. Some of the books, like, they can resist if it's not their alpha. It's like there's all different levels that the authors choose to do or not to do. But this one, she can kind of resist other alphas, but like he's the alpha for her. Then I had Baby in the Late Night Howlers by Kathryn Moon. This is the first in the Sweet Omegaverse series, and this one is a reverse harem with a motorcycle club, and they are obviously a pack of alphas, and we have this Omega who grew up as a beta. Always thought she was a beta, is one of the rare Omegas who presented as Omega later in life. So she's a full adult when she learns that she's an Omega, and the beta from this alpha crew actually like saves her because she's in a crowded bar of alphas when she starts like perfuming or something, I don't remember. So he saves her, so she's like very partial to him. So she ends up choosing their alpha pack, even though they're like not the richest and not the youngest and not the most powerful. And I actually love this one. I think this is a great one to start with, even though it doesn't explain the Omegaverse dynamics super well. But it's very sweet. Consent is very important in this book, and it is even discussed about how even though she's reacting, that's not consent, and that is unusual for Omegaverse, but I love that. There is a male-male relationship in this, and also I loved her friendship with the other females. Loved that. I was just very, very into this book. I thought it was fantastic. I've read a lot of books by Kathryn Moon after reading this one, but this is probably the sweetest. There are some kind of bad alphas who are not into consent and are trying to get an Omega, but her alphas are so good. They're so good to her. And yeah, there are a lot of them because it is a reverse harem, and it's like a lot of guys for a reverse harem. And her name is Baby, which honestly I find hard to forgive, but nonetheless, I still love this book and think it is a very safe one. Then I have Alpha Breeds, which is Alpha Horde number 1 by Milana Jax. This is my first ever Omegaverse. I stumbled upon it because I was going down the alien romance rabbit hole after reading Ruby Dixon for the first time. And Omegaverse aliens are weirder than regular aliens, just so you know. There's a lot. So in this particular series, the Omegas are humans from Earth, and of course humans don't realize that they have Omegas is basically how this works. But when confronted by the Alpha, it's very obvious. So she accidentally stumbles into like a portal thing and ends up in this alien world, but all the Omegas belong to the king. You cannot just mate an Omega, it's illegal, and he is the like general, the warlord of the Horde, which is basically the Alpha army. But he's not the king, and so he can't keep her, but basically he does because she's his mate. And it sets off a chain of events which we follow throughout the series as each Alpha kind of makes his own decision on whether to turn his Omega over to the king or to keep her and risk his life. And it's fascinating, and the world is very interesting. I read this whole series and the whole spin-off series as well. But basically, for sure, in this one, the Omegas will be overcome with like insatiable lust towards the Alphas. And there's like purring and stuff to like soothe them. And the Alphas are going to take advantage of that and lock up their woman. So again, like not great consent. Not great consent. But also, nothing super bad is going to happen to the heroines. The Alphas will protect them for everyone else, and the Alphas, while not giving them freedom and not giving them consent, besides that, treat their Omegas really well and honestly want nothing more than to make their Omega happy. So it's a good introduction. It was my introduction, and it's pretty sweet and safe while being so over the top. Then I have Omega Academy by Lily Archer. This one, I have no plans to finish the series because they're not allowed to mate, and like the school is stopping them from mating, and that stresses me out so much. This is another reverse harem, so there's the female Omega and then there's 3 male alphas, and they create the circle, which is like a very powerful mating thing that hasn't happened in 1,000 years, and the last one destroyed the world and yada yada yada. But she's a human, knows nothing about Omegas, alphas, and betas, and the alphas stowed away on the transport pod that went to get her, and she's like, I don't know what you're talking about, and they are trying to protect her. There's a mean girl who like wants to mate one of them, and they all feel like this main connection. And then there's something else that like makes this Omega really valuable and desired, but you don't find it out in the first book, and so I might have to finish the series to find out what it is. So they are aliens, but they are like all different species, but they're all like humanoid, if that makes sense. They're not very alien-y. It's a school setting, it's a reverse harem, and nothing super bad is happening to the Omega, at least not in the first book. And then lastly, I have Enduro Sector by Lexi Foss. So this one is a little bit darker, and honestly, this one does something that I don't like, which is that basically the first 60% of the book, the alpha is not good to her. Not because he's really trying to not be good to her, but because he does not understand what she does and does not know about the world, and is kind of treating her as if she knew what she was doing and what she was doing wrong, and she doesn't, and he like screws up, like he like breaks her, and another Omega gets like so mad at him. But once he like realizes what he's done, then he like actively tries to make up for it and is like super sweet to her from that point on. But the first 60% is kind of hard to read about because you're just like, no, you're so sad. It's so sad, and like you're so sad, and he's like not doing anything, and he's sad over there, but he's like harming you because he doesn't know. Okay, so I get like very invested in these things. So I don't think the entire series is like that. I think this book specifically was like that because that was their story, if that makes sense. But I don't know because I haven't read the next one yet, but I plan to. It's like a Snow White retelling, and she's like an Omega princess that he finds in the snow, and they're going to overthrow her evil stepmother, the queen, who's like a beast. Yeah, I'm excited for it. But anyways, this one, she is a human and gets taken by the wolves, and they give her a shot thingamabobber that turns her into a wolf, and turns out she's an Omega. There has never been a turned human that was Omega before, and so it's like a big deal, and they like don't have Omegas. They haven't had one in like 100 years or something like that. I don't know. And so she's like very, very desirable, and they're like trying to make a deal together, Omegas, and there's like all these things happening. He's the alpha, he's the ruler of it all, and yeah, like I said, first 60%, not great, but then the rest, I think he does actively try to make up for it. And this is one of those ones where, just so you know, like, content warning, she gets threatened to be raped and threatened to have a forced miscarriage by, like, the villains towards the end. But it's one of those ones where she ends up making them regret it so much they're just like, yeah, go get them. So it's not as triggering because it's like a brief period of time where like they have the upper hand, and then of course the good guys end up winning and they live happily ever after. But just be aware of that. So he does kind of get her pregnant without her understanding anything, and is like, you're my breeder, you're not my mate. Like, mistakes were made. And it's talked about how like if you're not mated, then another alpha can like defeat your alpha and take you, and alphas don't take kindly to another alpha's offspring, so they will kill them if they take the Omega. So there's like that whole thing happening. But of course that doesn't happen. She ends up being okay. But yeah, there you go. So it was very interesting. It's very stressful. Lexi Foss, I feel like, is like my top tier darkness, because like I cannot do any darker than her books. Like I have to be in the mood, but also she's like just within my comfort zone enough that I find it incredibly addictive and like all the feelings. So there's that. Those are my Omegaverse romance recommendations. Give me yours. If you do give me recommendations, maybe let me know like how dark or content warnings, because I don't like reading about like super sad, terrible things happening. So there's that. Have you ever read Omegaverse? Does it sound incredibly weird to you? Where are you at on the scale? Let me know. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.